Hello and welcome to the deep dive spoiler-filled discussion of the 2009 Indonesian horror film Macabre, suggested to us by Mark Alvarez. Thank you again, Mark. And for those of you unfamiliar with the deep dive discussions I post here occasionally, if I feel a film really needs to be discussed further beyond a spoiler-free review, then I will make one of these videos, and I really did think so in this case. There were just some plot points that I wanted to hit. So if you have not seen this movie, if you are worried about it being spoiled, then I would suggest not watching this one until you finish watching the Macabre movie. But moving on, the thing that I talked about in the review was the two elements that this movie could have gone with either the villains lowering their guard or coming up with inept choices that would allow the heroes to succeed, or having the heroes rise to the occasion and allowing them to succeed in that way. And I much prefer the latter. And this movie chose the former, and it really struck me as peculiar, with especially considering the illusion that Dara and her family have been doing this since the late 1800s. So they are very well versed in it, and the Dara character especially was fantastic about the way that she looked at the heroes of the film, just with that kind of cold, calculating, quizzical stare. And it really struck me as somebody that is watching the livestock struggle. And I think that that's ultimately how the villains of this film should have been looking at the heroes, and I think that they did. That is how, by all accounts, their personalities, they were not dealing with human beings, they were dealing with livestock, or just meat to be processed, or ultimately the ends to their means. And that would have been great if their choices had reflected that. Let me give you an example. During the processing, when you had 3 or 4 of them tied up in a room, and they were being processed one by one and strapped to a table and torn apart really viciously, which seemed to me a bit odd. The one word that I really kept thinking about, just in the way that their personalities were in this film, was surgical. And yet, when it came time to actually process people as meat, the last thing in the world it was surgical. They were using chainsaws, and they had a table that was specifically meant for bleeding somebody out. You could strap them to it, and you can raise the feet. And the one thing I really couldn't understand was why it wasn't dealt with in a more surgical fashion, why they weren't simply hanging the people upside down and processing them as meat. Cut the carotid artery and let them bleed out. And then, process them without having the absolute god-awful bloody mess on the table with chainsaws and all that stuff. I've seen enough educational videos out there to know how meat is typically processed, and strapped to a table while still alive and flailing while you hammer at them with a chainsaw haphazardly is just generally not it. If anything else, it ruins the flavor of the meat. But regardless, it just seemed like a weird choice. And there were a bunch of moments like that in this. And they never really had the heroes rise to the point of being able to stand toe-to-toe with the villains. Yes, they did wind up overcoming them. But I think that was a combination of just resiliency and beast mode-y good dumb luck more than anything else. I would have much preferred a level of return of the cold calculating nature of things by the heroes to the villains. If they started to notice that they were being drugged and passed out, if one of them happened to, take the knife from their table and, slide it up their sleeve or something like that. And then when they were potentially hanging upside down, waiting for the carotid artery to be severed, managed to make their escape like that. Something along those lines. I would rather have the villains stay competent and have the heroes rise up to them. When they were going through the woods, they managed to make their escape from the room. Everything was done with as much noise and tripping and yelling as possible, and for me that was just really frustrating. It's like, make your silent getaway. Yes, you are in the middle of nowhere. It's time to walk 10 miles, but let's do it as quietly as possible. There was just a lot of really bad decisions made, and regardless, they kept lowering the standards of actions within the villains so that bumbling nature of the heroes could still manage to overcome and overpower them. And that was the ultimate point of what I was saying in my review, and where I really wish they had wound up going better with. There were just so many points in which I really wanted to yell at the screen of, what are you doing? Especially towards the end when Dara has been slammed with the car door, and this is the umpteenth time that somebody has been seemingly killed and then raised back to life. And after slamming her into the tree with the car door, she takes the moment to turn around and talk to the baby. It's like, get out of there. How many times does somebody have to almost be dead and stand up and attack again before you get it that you should just go? Just go. Don't look back. Don't talk to the baby. Don't make time for anything else. Just go. But ultimately, I really did enjoy this one. I just wish that it had made some better choices, and I still wish that the villains had made some better choices, causing the heroes to rise up to them. But that should about do it. That's my deep dive of 2009's Macabre from Indonesia. Thank you very much for joining me. Please look for my review tomorrow.